What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode. So I recently just got back from another trip to Japan. I think that was my 7th trip there just in the past 2 years, and basically almost every time I go I always just end up buying just tackle, especially when we start going into tons and tons of different tackle shops all across, honestly, the entire island that is Japan. And this time was basically no different. So I'm basically gonna kind of show you guys what I picked up. Some stuff is practical, some stuff you guys have seen before. Some other things, like the first thing we're gonna talk about is kind of one of those head scratcher ones of like, what? Why is Japan like this? But I love that they think like this. And so the first lure we're gonna be talking about is a crawler. Everybody knows what a crawler is nowadays, but this is a very unique looking crawler. It is in basically the shape and image of a dachshund. Like, dude, look at this thing. Are you serious? It's got like these like leather ears. Like, are we serious? This is one of those wild crawler baits or just lures in general that you'll come across if you ever go into any of the random Japanese tackle shops that they have littered across Japan. And when I saw this one the last time I was in there, I was like, this is so ridiculous. I kind of just have to buy it. I want to see how the action is. I want to see if I can even maybe catch a fish on it in a later video. But I mean, detail, it's a fun bait. It's a crawler. Everybody loves a crawler. So I think I could catch a fish on it. And just to say I caught a fish on a dog lure is kind of what motivates me to even fish this thing. It's made by Fish Arrow, which kind of popular, kind of not. Fish Arrow used to be a fairly popular brand. They still do some things here and there with some pretty big names like DRT and some other companies. However, Fish Arrow is one of those off-the-wall kind of brands in Japan, and that's why you get one of these baits right here. Now, another off-the-wall bait that I guess is apparently very popular in Japan, and it's called candy fish. That's right, you're taking a look at the lure. Nope, this isn't candy. This is actually a lure. So we actually ended up meeting this guy when we were down on Lake Biwa, and he kind of gave us an introduction to the bait. And honestly, this thing is absolutely wild. The guy who makes it, Haza, he's a really cool guy. We were able to talk to him for a couple of days, and he kind of just ran through this bait. And basically the bait is, it's like almost like a do everything bait, almost per se, but it's in the shape of a gummy. Like, that's literally the lure. I'm not joking. This is the lure right here. But when Haza was showing us how to actually fish this thing, you can fish it in a wide variety of different ways, and it kind of acts like a crankbait, swim bait. Like, if you rig it up here with the weight, it has a shimmy fall, you can burn it, you can twitch it. Like, there were so many different ways you could fish this little guy, and in Japan, these are really, really popular. So I don't know how much game this will have here in the States, but it is a very, very wild looking lure, and it catches fish. So that was kind of a weird one, but Haza was a really cool guy. He's got a great YouTube channel. He follows me. So super awesome, strange lure. Another one of those very strange lures that really you would only ever see in Japan. Okay, now going into something more practical or normal, we were at an event called Mother Lake Attraction, and at this event, well, I should say at most events that happen in Japan, whether it's a big show or a smaller show, like normally companies will come and you can have like exclusive or limited edition this show's color or this show's bait. And so at Mother Lake Attraction, we ran into a booth called Kurudo Lures. Kurudo has done stuff with Swim Bait Underground in the past, like their crawlers. And while we were there, they had a wide variety of different swim baits. And I found that this one looked the most practical, looked the coolest out of all of them. And so me and my buddy CJ, we both ended up picking one. And honestly, I think it's at least paint-wise, it looked really, really good. That thing right there. This is called the Snooker right here. And I got it in this super badass bass color. So it's a multi-piece segmented swim bait that you can swim just basically on a straight retrieve. And it looks really, really good. It was at a pretty good price too. And I was like, well, I don't have one of these in my collection, so I might as well pick one up. But super, super cool looking lure. Okay, moving on to a brand that basically everybody knows, and every time I go to Japan, I'm always looking for these specific baits, and that would be something that's not very popular, or it didn't really take off in Japan like it did here in the US, but of course, that is the Depps Slide Swimmer 250. Whether it's the new style or some of the OG ones, these you can find kind of every once in a while, like the 250 size. The other ones that I buy, like the 115 or the 175, you can find those way more often in a lot more places. But to find some of like the OG 250s, it's actually kind of rare to find them. But if you do find them, they're normally at a pretty good price. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of the Fire Tiger color, but I was able to get it for like super cheap. I want to say it was like 80 bucks or something like that. So I just had to pick it up. I mean, it was an absolute steal for an OG. And if I really don't like this color, I can obviously just, you know, take off the color. I can have it sent, have it painted for like 50, 60 bucks, and you can have a really cool color, Depps 250. So had to pick that one up. This color was a silent killer, actually. I recently just busted off the lip, but it still has that weight there in the back. But again, you could find a couple of those silent killers every once in a while in the OG for a really good price in some of those shops. So every time I see them, I try and pick them up, scoop them. It's just worth it. And then the new style, you can find the new styles basically anywhere and everywhere in Japan at basically any tackle shops. And brand new, this is that Ghost Ayu color. I got this from one of the tackle shops out there for super dirt cheap. It was so cheap that my buddy CJ was like, dude, for that price, I've got to buy one too. I'm not a huge fan of the new style, but for the price, I was like, dude, like, at basically the price, I can basically throw this in the gnarly stuff. I can sink it down to the bottom and fish it that way. Like, it's just insane how here in the States, you know, the 250 really took off, and you know, you had Butch Brown be kind of the person to really elevate the 250, but in Japan it just never really took off, and it's been that way ever since. So being able to grab 250s over there is an absolute huge plus. The 175 version you can find basically in a lot of the used tackle shops as well. This is one of my favorite colors. This is a bloody flash carp. This color is super sick. And again, you can find these in the OG fairly regularly, especially in the 175 size. You might have to dig around a little bit and find them, but you can definitely find them. Now, one that I've never owned before, that when I saw it, I was like, dude, I've got to pick one of these up, is this guy here. This is basically the bottom rig version. I want to say it's a little bit smaller than the normal 175 size, but these guys were weighted in a way, you got like a weight up here in the front to basically be able to fish on the bottom, very much like how the negotiators are, just in a depth profile. So I've never had one of them. I saw one for a decent price, and so I just had to pick one up. So I think it's a cool concept, cool lure. I don't know if I'll ever fish it, but I'm glad I was able to at least pick one of them up. Now, two other baits that I'd had my eye on now for almost 2 years, ever since going to Japan, and that is from a company called Dream Express. They make two different kind of swim baits that are multi-piece like this. These are kind of like cousins to each other. This top one here is called the Triple Deluxe, and then this one down here on the bottom is called the Pinky Deluxe. Smaller version. Now, the Pinky Deluxe is, I believe, one of the newer of the two, and it comes with this lip here. This lip is detachable, but you can keep that lip in there if you wanted to dead walk the bait. And I've had my eye on these for quite a while. They're not extremely popular in Japan, and I don't know of anybody here in the States wanting them or even knowing what this thing is. So after seeing it forever and ever while going to Japan, I was like, all right, let me just pick one up for cheap and and see what the action's like and how they are, and see if there's a spot in my own fishing to be able to fish these. So I think it's a cool lure. I like the profile of it. So I haven't even really seen the swim on them, so who knows. But I was just able to pick these up both. I want to say that this is a 9-inch bait here, the triple deluxe, probably in that like high 3 or 4 ounce range, and then the pinky is probably in that 8 range or so, and this is probably like 3 ounces or so. So really cool baits. They're different. I just don't know how I'm going to feel when I start fishing them. There's just different baits to fish and just see, and maybe there's some play to it, maybe there's not, but I thought it was a cool looking swim bait. Good price too at one of the used tackle shops. So maybe I'll do a video on this if I really like the baits. Now, a lot of you guys know that I'm a huge fan of DRT, and here in the States, it's hard to find shops that carry DRT. Luckily enough, the Hookup Tackle will carry DRT from time to time, but sometimes we just don't get a lot of the cool JDM colors. So every time I go over there and I go into some of the tackle shops, I'm always looking for them. And this last time, I was able to walk away with two really cool colors. The Queen, which when I was there in April, I ended up losing my Queen that caught me a lot of fish, so I was super bummed. But luckily enough, I was able to find a Queen out there in a low float, and so super stoked on that pickup. But the other color, the color that I really wanted to get, was the Nagoya rainbow color. Ever since seeing this color many years ago, I've always just wanted to own one. But the original Nagoya rainbow color was for the Nagoya show, or the Keep Cast show, way back in 2019. And again, at these shows, it's a limited edition color. They normally do not re-release these colors. So when I saw that they re-released them in Japan, I was like, dude, I've gotta pick one up. Well, I ended up picking up 2 of them. Like, this color is super sick. It's kind of like a shiny rainbow trout with some blue hit. Like, dude, this color is super badass. And so always wanted the color, so I was able to pick up 2 of them, and I think this color is super sick. So I'm stoked that I was able to get a Queen replacement, as well as a color that I've been waiting for a very long time. So for DRT, I was super stoked to bring those back home. I was also able to find a Hama Pink Tiny Clash out there, which I've never owned a Hama Pink before. I know my buddy Jared loves that pink translucent color, so I was able to find one of these at a good price as well. I think pink translucent is perfect for that clear water. It looks super natural. So saw one of those, had to pick that one up. And then of course, while I'm out there, another thing that I like to pick up are like lips from DRT, and then tails. There's tails in so many of those shops out there. So like Tiny Clash or K9, I was just looking for Tiny Clash V-tails, so picked up a bunch of the V-tails for the Tiny Clash. So going over to Japan, I'm just able to actually get DRT, because since I guess DRT is based in Japan, a lot of those shops get kind of first priority to it. Obviously we have DRT USA out here that tries to get stuff to different shops, but it's so spread out, and so whenever I'm in Japan, I try and stock up as much as I can. Now, one outdated thing that you can find basically in every tackle shop out there that nobody really buys, and that you can get them cheap, that you kind of have to have a special player to even use it, but that is DVDs. I am a huge fan of DVDs, especially fishing DVDs. I mean, every now and then I'll find like a cool old school like depths DVD with Okumura throwing like 250s and stuff like that. And so I obviously have to buy them because you can't really get them online. I mean, I think nowadays a lot of these DVDs have been converted to some of the Japanese online DVD to MP4 websites, but I'm obviously not very fluent in Japanese, so I'm not exactly sure the requirements to do that. And so it's just easier for me to just buy the physical DVDs if I could find them. So this last time, I was able to buy a Kanamori one from a while back, as well as a Kenta Kimura DVD as well. So who knows, I might give this one to my buddy Louise, which she's a huge fan of Kanamori. This Kenta one's pretty cool. I saw that it had that 13-inch Kinku, so I was like, well, motivation to keep throwing it. So DVDs, they're plentiful out there, and they're fairly cheap. to get, unless you get some like the newer ones. But overall, best bang for your buck. There's like 3 discs in some of these, 4 discs in some of these, so it's a cool find if you can find them. On to another brand that most guys know about, but isn't really popular here in the US. However, it's still fairly popular in Japan, but I don't really know why. I know the history of the brand Gancraft has been around for many years. In the Joint Claw 178, I just did a video on why this bait is so special. And that's because this was basically the first Japanese glide bait ever made way back in 2004. And we were actually able to fish with a guy named Koji Hasegawa. Now, Hasegawa is basically the guy that does the pink style baits. He does them in the Deer T-baits. He does them in the Gancraft, obviously. But what was cool was that Hasegawa was actually the guy who was on the Gancraft pro staff way back in the day, and he was able to actually fish the 178. So he's kind of revered as like the OG glide bait Gancraft guy. And we were able to fish with him. I was able to kind of pick his brains on, you know, fishing here in the States, fishing in the US, soft baits, hard baits, and as a gift, he gave me one of these awesome looking Gancraft 178s in his custom color, and this thing is super badass. I do definitely want to catch a fish on it, but I almost kind of just want to put it on the wall and just look at it. It's a really cool color. The other things that I was looking for in Gancraft while I was over there, that I've seen them a couple times, but I never pulled the trigger, but these 2 colors look just too cool not to get, and that is in the Ratchet swim baits that they make. These are the Ratchet 184s. Dude, these colors are super sick. So you've got this beautiful bluegill color. It's got the pink back, but that's more for you just to be able to like trace it in the water. But man, this color is super sick. And then I got one in a bass color. Dude, the bass color is so nasty. Gancraft makes some really clean looking colors. Look at that. That is sick. The bass one is so detailed. Oh, so nasty. Japan really does a fantastic job on any of their bass patterns. And then this bluegill one's so nasty too. So, had to pick these guys up just because they're so cool. And I know a lot of guys like the Ratchet. It's just a taller profile, multi-piece bait again, and you can glide it, you can just straight swim it, you can burn it, you can fish it slow. So I know a lot of guys in Japan really do like that Ratchet, so had to pick those up. Another huge brand that everybody knows, Megabass. Megabass just came out with a re-release of their I-Break. And now, I guess I would call it a swim bait just because it's jointed and the size of it. But basically what you do with the I-Break is you just cast it out, you straight retrieve it, and the tail on the back of it kind of kicks pretty hard. Kick. But the reason why they call it an I-Break is because you have these 2 fins up here in the front of the bait. You guys can see that there. And basically what that does is when you cast it out and you reel it and you pause it, it stops. It comes to a complete stop. And in Japan, right now, a very popular technique or way to fish a lure is called the nigashi action, which means basically an escaping action. This is really popular in let's say like the dice rubber from OSP, where when you twitch it, twitch, it has all this action and then it comes to a complete stop. And for whatever reason, this is a very strong triggering mechanism for when fish are following it, or if they're just trying to get a fish to commit to a bait. And so they've basically done the same thing in just a much bigger profile. So the idea is that if a fish is following it and you're reeling it and you just pause it, they kind of just either run into it or they think that it's injured or something like that. For whatever reason, it seems to work. And so Japan has kind of been on this nigashi, like where the bait has all this action and then it comes to a complete stop. Action, stop. And it seems like on that stop, a lot of these guys in Japan are getting bites. So this is kind of the concept with it. So I just wanted to pick one up to see if it has any play or any game here in the States. And I obviously like Megabass, and I think anything new from them is definitely worth trying and picking up. So had to pick one of these guys up. All right, one that has been really going around social media heavy lately, and that is of course the Jackall slick bait. Now, if you guys don't know what the Jackall slick bait is, the slick bait is kind of not a new concept. It's been done multiple times before from brands like Depths, and DRT has talked about it before as well. But it's basically a bait that does a yoko-yoko, and yoko-yoko just means side to side. And this one is similar to a bait that Depths made called the High Compass. Back in the day, I don't know if they still make it, but basically, this is the slick bait here, and basically where you tie on is here on these sides. These are not for hooks. These are actually where you tie. And depending on which side that you put the snap on, it's gonna go one way or it's gonna go the other way completely, all the way. Jackall has obviously, with a bait like this, has made some fantastic promotional pieces. If you guys haven't seen them on Instagram, they're really cool, to where basically if there's a wall here, they can make a cast here and the bait just swims this way, and you kind of just pull it this way and it just up along the wall, and it's a topwater bait, so it makes a lot of commotion. It looks like a bait fish or some type of creature trying to get out of the water, and that just drives the fish crazy. And what's really cool is, you know, a lot of times in Japan when they're doing the Okapari style or the shore fishing, a lot of times guys can't parallel, obviously, the other side of the bank. And so what they do with this is they cast it out and they kind of have it at an angle, and with their rod tip kind of also at an angle, they can get this bait to kind of go to the other side and parallel completely on the other side. Instead of having to cast at it and bring it out, it allows that bait to ride. It allows that bait to ride on the other side of the bank where you're standing, and you're able to get that bait to completely ride up against it for quite a long ways, more than you could really do with any other bait. So that was kind of the concept of the slick bait, was to be able to get to the other side in parallel and make this bait really do some really cool things. So I actually was able to get to play with this the other day. I had a lot of fun. I had like multiple bites on it. I caught one fish on it, which was cool. But I mean, this is something that when I first saw it, I was like, man, this is a really cool concept. It's been done before, but since this is kind of new, it's kind of in the talks right now. So I was able to find a couple of them while I was in Japan, and I absolutely love this bait. I really hope they make a size that's a little bit bigger. I think something that's, I think this is 120 millimeters. So something in that like 145 would be super sick. Something that I can cast on like a traditional like medium heavy swim bait rod would be really badass. But this thing's half of an ounce. It casts super light, so definitely casting it, you definitely need to be a better caster than I am for sure. But the slick bait from Jackall is a really cool one. Okay, and then last but not least, I picked up some stuff from a brand called Imakatsu. Imakatsu's been around for quite a long time. They make a lot of cool baits, but it's not very popular here in the States. Obviously far more popular in Japan, but still not that popular. But they make a lot of baits, and some baits much better than others. And one that I've known to be really good, and that is just the Aventer Crawler. You can find these almost anywhere and everywhere in Japan, the Aventer Crawler, whether it's in a used tackle shop or in a new shop at all. Like the Aventer Crawler, it's one that I've played around with. I know it's really good. I know it's a really good crawler. Some guys have kept it really hush here in the States, but the guys that do know that this thing is an absolute killer. So I just had to pick up another one. This one was just kind of a white color with some cool looking blades on it. So saw this one, had to scoop it up. But what was cool is we actually ended up going to Ikehara and Nanaira for 2 days, and we got to fish with one of the pro staff. His name is Mihara. And Mihara is a very famous Japanese bass fisherman, and his pro staff is Imakatsu. And when we fished with him, we got to fish basically lures that Imakatsu has made specifically for those bodies of water. One of them you guys may or may not know about, but this, oh my goodness, this is the Javelin from Imakatsu. They make a wide variety of different sizes, but I ended up picking up 2 sizes. They make an 8-inch version, which I believe they call this the Monster version, if I'm not mistaken. and it's just basically a segmented 8-inch swim bait that Imakatsu makes it, and they've made it for many years. It was knocked off by Lake Fork lures or baits or whatever you want to call them, and so this is the original. And this was kind of my first time fishing the Javelon, and when I was at Nanairo, I picked this bait up and I was getting absolutely chewed on with this bait. We have a video series coming out at the Hookup Tackle. You guys will see that footage sometime soon, but let's just say I caught a bass on this thing and I had multiple other bites using this thing. It's got a really good swim. It really swims best at like a medium retrieve, I would say. And so just kind of keeping a nice straight retrieve, you can skip this bait really well. As you guys see, I've added kind of a super janky, you know, stinger hook to it, because when we were there at Nanairo, the way the fish were biting it, they were only just biting kind of like the back half. And so I was like, dude, I'm so sick and tired of this. So I had to tie on a trailer, and I ended up catching a fish on this bait. So I was super stoked to catch it with, you know, an Imakatsu Pro Staff guy who's super famous. I was just really stoked to catch a fish on an Imakatsu bait out there. And you can tell when you fish those bodies of water, when you pick up a Javelon like this, you can see like, oh, I see why this bait was made. It was made specifically to fish these bodies of water. Can they work anywhere else? Absolutely. But I can see the thought process when you're fishing these bodies of water. And so I thought that was really cool to be with a guy who develops a lot of these baits, fish where these baits were basically designed on, and see why they work as well as they do. So the Javelon was a cool one to catch fish on. A new one that Mihara just kind of developed, and a lot of guys are kind of getting hyped on, is this soft glide bluegill bait. Now this thing is pretty cool. I fished it with Mihara. He was kind of like breaking it down for me and why he made it, what it does, and it's a really cool, realistic looking soft bluegill glide. Now it's got a kind of vortex style tail back here with a joint. Then you've got these two eyelets here. These eyelets are actually made for hooks, so you can hook on here on the side. Then you've got another hook hanger down here for like a grenade weight. Then you actually have the line tie. So a lot of different things. Now Mihara had this one weighted, and when you fish this thing like that, it has like a shimmy fall, and then when it lands on the bottom, it sits perfectly upright on the bottom. And how we were fishing it at the time is he had these side hooks here, and basically I'd cast it out, I'd reel it. If a faller came up to it, I would kill it, let it fall, and a fish would come up and like bite the side of it. I ended up missing my only bite that I had on it, but again, it was like, oh, I see why this bait is made that way with these side hooks. There's purpose behind everything that is done here. You can get it to glide if you really snap it really hard, realistic colors. So durability seems to be pretty good on it too. So overall, I think this is gonna be an absolute winner for a lot of the guys that are around bluegill eaters. So this thing's really cool. I was able to fish it with Mihara, the guy who basically developed the bait. So that was a really fun trip. I hope to fish with him again. I hope to fish those lakes again. Extremely beautiful lakes with big fish in them. So definitely another dream trip that I hope to go on my own so you guys can see it. All right, that is basically all the baits that took quite a bit longer than normal. This is kind of like a run-of-the-mill trip whenever I go to Japan and I'm going into a lot of tackle shops. This is kind of low for me, honestly, where every time I go, there's always things to find, always new things to try, or hey, I've seen this on Instagram, or I've seen this be talked about from a few Japanese guys, and if there's an opportunity for me to pick it up, it's basically the only chance I have to pick up some of these baits is while I'm in Japan. So to be able to get some of this stuff, really stoked to get. And maybe I do videos on some specific stuff if you guys want to see that, whether it's like the Dream Express bait, or as crazy it is, the dog crawler. Like, I'm totally down to try any of this stuff, and if you guys are interested in any of it, let me know with a comment down below, and I'll probably try and do a full-length video on these things. So other than that, thank you guys ever so much for watching, and as always, please go out there and chase your dreams.